So this message today should encourage you. If you need a little help, if you don't, then maybe these principles will help you, because one day you're going to need some help. Amen. You're going to need it. It's coming. Just hang in there. But to just review, in chapter 1, Jesus is performing miracles. He's teaching, he's preaching, but he's also performing miracles and showing, hey, there's nothing that God can't do. I do all things, but I do it because God empowers me. And this validates, this proves that I am who I say I am. The first thing we see in chapter 1 is Philip was talking to Nathanael and said, hey man, I think we just found a Messiah. And they were standing under this fig tree, nobody around. And then when they get to Jesus, then Jesus said, man, I saw you when you was under the fig tree. He didn't know he was anywhere around. That's a miracle right there. And then in chapter 2, we see he turns water into what? Wine, that's right. He turns water into wine. And then in the third chapter, he gets into this discussion with Nicodemus and talk about the spiritual birth and how it comes from above. And you got to have it in order to get to heaven. And you got to believe for it to take place. And then John chapter 4, we see Jesus heals a royal official's son. And the son not even there. He just speaks the words that, all right, he's just taken care of. Go home. He goes home and he finds that he's healed. The very same time when Jesus said that he's going to be okay, that's when he got well. And then in chapter 5 last week, we saw where Jesus healed this man beside the pool of, who remembers the name of it? Pool of, that's right, Bethesda. You all got it right. Bethesda. That'd be a good name for a kid. Bethesda. All right? That's like, not say. Remember them brothers in the Bible? I thought if we ever have twins, too late now. I was going to name them Uz and Buzz. That's two names out of the Old Testament. If you want to know what to name your kids one day, just read through the Old Testament. You'll find some good ones in there. Uz and Buzz. But anyway, Nicodemus, that's an interesting name. But in chapter 5, this man gets healed who'd been by this pool, laying there. And anyway, Jesus comes along, heals him. He'd been sick for 38 years and finds out. Jesus said, now look, don't be sinning no more lest something worse comes on you, see. So there's a lesson in itself. But demonstrating the miraculous power of Jesus and his ability to help people in need. Now let's look here today. I'm not going to do this first one. Chapter 6 begins with the feeding of 5,000. We all know that story. Where Jesus took, how many fish did he take? How many? 2, that's right. 2 feet. Was it 2 fish? Is that what it was? Let me get in my notes here. I may get this wrong. Sometimes I get it backwards. Yeah, 2 fish and 5 pieces of bread. Is that the way the story went? It's like when I go in a restaurant, I like to mess with the girl up there. She said, walking, how many? I'll say 2. or 2. You know. But 2 fishes, 5 pieces of bread. He fed enough out of that to feed 5,000 people. And then there were leftovers. Everybody ate and got full, it said. They all ate and satisfied. And then they took up the fragments, the leftovers. How many baskets full? 12. 12 baskets full. So listen, Jesus can take care of your problem. If you need some help today, I'm telling you, he's the man you need to get in touch with. After you've done all you can do, called all the people you can call, don't leave Jesus out. He can help you. It may seem like an impossibility, and I'm learning more and more to just call on him when I need help at work in a secular situation. Lord, I can't get all this done. I need your help. And he provides. He provides little by little. Now, with that backdrop, let's look now at chapter 6 in John, verse number 16. And let's go to verse 16. Now, when evening came, this was after he just fed the 5,000. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea. When did they go down to the sea? When evening came. Okay, now, that's important for later on. And after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea began to be stirred up because a strong wind was blowing. Then, when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, how far? 3 or 4 miles. Now, that sea was about 8 miles across, so they kind of about halfway. All right? You getting the picture? Well, they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles. They saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. All right, let's see if we can dissect this and learn some things from it. All right, now, first thing is, we see the disciples get into a boat. All right, and they head across an 8-mile sea. And now, where are they going? Well, they're going because Jesus had commanded them to do so. We can see in this chapter them getting into the boat, but if you look at Matthew chapter 14, 22, after these people had eaten, these 5,000 had been fed, it says in 14:22 of Matthew, immediately he made them get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. So, they were commanded by Jesus to get in this boat. That's why they were doing what they were doing. Mark 6:45 says the same thing, only it adds that this, while he was sending the crowds away, he commanded them to get into the boat. Okay? Following Jesus may get you out of your comfort zone. And we see they were doing this because they were commanded. They were in this boat headed to the other side because Jesus told them to do that. And then the wind picks up and things get difficult. And I remember my first full-time church. I thought, man, this is going to be just so fun and just loving the Lord and loving the people. And I'm going to tell you what. It didn't take me long to get out of that I was out of my comfort zone, because I was dealing not only with saved people, but I was dealing with people who either were lost out of God's will. Let me be nice and say it that way, okay? And just like Jesus, everywhere he went, he either started a revival or he started a riot, right? And when you start following Jesus, things are just going to happen. He's called us to peace, but it can be peace, but he's also called us, we're going to be in conflict in this world. There's going to be trouble, there's going to be conflict, but he's called us to peace, meaning not an absence of conflict, but peace in the midst of conflict if we'll just turn to him. Well, these disciples, it wasn't a people problem they had, it was circumstantial problem. It was weather problem. The wind picked up, began blowing them around, and I guess when the wind starts picking up, I've seen it do it on Lake Seminole, which is about the same size of this lake, or this Sea of Galilee it's sometimes called, and today it's called a sea in the scripture. But the lake in Lake Seminole, you get out there and the wind starts picking up, them waves can get on up. Anybody seen that besides me? And if you out there in a small boat, they can come over on the inside, right? Anybody experience that? And then I've noticed also you can see them stumps that you didn't see before. You just go down and you see them stumps. Oh man, I'm glad that wave came down. I see that now. But that's what was happening. They were out here, the wind picked up, and they were trying to get to the other side, and it was dark, see? And then, so when you're following Jesus and trouble comes, don't think, well, I must have missed it. No, you must have got it right because you got some adversity going on. See, you start following Jesus, it's not going to be all rosy and all peachy. There's going to be some difficulties, see? He wants to keep us in need. Following him, he always, over and over and over, you can see him in the Old Testament and in the New, he leads his people into places of need. Because I think he wants to keep us humble and keep us, focused on him. All right? So, it may be following Jesus gets you in a desperate need. What happened here? They became in a dangerous situation and a needy situation. There was adversity. But look what happens next. In verse 18, they saw Jesus walking on the water. Jesus comes to them walking on the water. Now, how did they see him? Verse 17 says it was dark. So how did they see him? Well, maybe it was just not pitch dark, but unpitch dark. I don't know. It was kind of in between. Who knows? The moon might have been shining. Wind was blowing. Usually if it gets winds come along, sometimes it means it's cloudy and you may not, I don't know. Maybe Jesus was glowing when he came out there. And I think that's what happened. Other gospels say they thought he was a ghost. They were scared. They thought they were seeing a ghost. But when he spoke and they heard his voice that kind of calmed them down, they recognized him. And he said, "It is I, do not be afraid." And so in verse 21, they were willing to receive him into the boat. And look what it says next. And immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. Immediately. After Jesus got into the boat with them. That means the wind stopped. Matthew 14:32 says the wind stopped. Immediately don't mean, let me back up and correct. Immediately don't mean the wind stopped, okay? But Matthew 14:32, immediately they were the other side, and immediately based on 14:32 of Matthew, the wind stopped right then. Now, the boat was immediately on land. Now, my mind kind of worked crazy, all right? Y'all know that by now. So how long did it take them to get there? Well, we know they were about halfway, right? They were in about halfway. Let's say they were 4 miles in. And how wide was it? About 8 miles. Right? 8 miles, right? Anyway, so they made 4 more miles immediately. I started doing some math. Let's see now, 60 miles per hour, a mile a minute, 4 miles, that'd take 4 minutes if you're going 60 miles per hour. And to cut your time in half, you got to double your speed, right? So let's say, how far could you get in 120 miles going 4 miles? 120 more miles per hour? 2 minutes is what it would take. If you were to get there 4 miles in 1 minute, you got to be traveling 250 miles per hour. If you're going to get that far, 4 miles and 30 seconds, you got to be going 480 miles per hour. And 15 seconds, you got to be going 960 miles per hour. They're getting pretty fast, aren't they? And if you want to cut it in half again, well, how far could you get in 7.5 seconds? Or how long, how the 4 miles in 7.5 seconds? It would take 1,920 miles per hour. All right, let's cut that in half. 3 3/4 seconds, 3,840 miles per hour. These guys are going fast. If they were to make it, let's get break it on down. At 9/10 of a second, they would have to be traveling 15,360 miles per hour. Well, if you wanted to cut that in half to 46/100ths of a second, it would take 30,720 miles per hour. That's getting there, isn't it? That's almost getting there before you leave, you know. For them to make it in just under 1/4 of a second, 4 miles, they would have had to travel at a speed of 61,440 miles per hour. How about 1/8 of a second? Let's cut it in half again. Over 250,000 miles per hour. They got there fast, wouldn't you say? Immediately. So that was really faster than that. They went so fast the sound barrier didn't have time to see them go through. Probably nothing happened. The point is, Jesus can help someone really fast, see? They were in need. He got in there with their situation and boom, fixed it just like that. Fixed it just like that. Now, let's look at some facts and we're going to be out of here shortly. In this story, here's some important points. In this story, everyone who followed Jesus' commands ended up in a place of need. They experienced some type of trouble. In this story, Jesus saw every one of his followers when they got into trouble and knew what was causing the trouble. Now, I didn't put these scriptures in here, but I read the other Gospels. It says, in one of the other ones, Matthew or Mark, he saw them when the wind was on them and knew what was going on. He saw them. It was dark, see? It was dark and he saw them. And they were 4 miles away and Jesus still saw them. Well, listen, you ever wonder where God is and you got something going on? He sees every bit of it. He sees it. He even knows the cause of it. He knew these guys were rowing hard, straining at the oars, but he also knew the wind was what's causing it. All right? Now, third thing here. Jesus came to, in this story, Jesus came to every one of his followers and joined them in the middle of their trouble. Anybody getting encouraged in today? Here's a fourth one. When Jesus got into the boat with them, or into the situation with them, their trouble stopped immediately, right then. See, when you get trouble, all you need is just Jesus in your situation, where you're at, He can fix it just like that. To 250 miles per hour. He can do it, see? And everyone in this story who was going through trouble because they were following Jesus got to see Jesus walking on water. Listen, you might be in a situation where you might just be able to see Jesus like you've never seen him before. You might get to see him do something that nobody has ever seen him do before. So when things start going wrong and you're following Jesus, start getting a little bit excited. Hey, God, something. He might be fixing to do something ain't nobody ever seen but me, and I'm going to get to see it. See? They got to see Jesus walking on water. They got to see a miracle, and they got to experience a miracle. Jesus eliminated the source of the problem. The strong wind stopped immediately. Number 6 in this story. All the people in this story, they were having trouble doing what Jesus had told them to do. There was difficulty with following Jesus. Number 7, they only got halfway through with what Jesus told them to do. He told them to go to the other side. Halfway is as far as they could get, right? They were doing the best they can, and He helped them with the rest. That's good right there, isn't it? He helped them with the rest. And the final thing is, the final point is a closing comment. The final point is, when things got too difficult, Jesus literally stepped in and finished the job with them in a record time. It's a good thing to travel with Jesus. If you can get Him going and you follow Him, and just, whenever He already knows what's going on, but sometimes you have to cry out to Him. And there's not even a record here of them praying. This is just Jesus watching His followers. So it's a good thing just to be a follower of Jesus. You don't always have to cry out to Him. He's still going to help you, see. Now, my mind, note of interest, something I picked up on. I was reading this in the other Gospels again. And in this story, we see, let me find my scripture here. John chapter 6, verse 16. It says, now when evening came, remember I asked you to repeat that with me? His disciples came down to the sea, and they got into the boat, right? And it says in verse 17, it had already become dark. Remember that? Okay. Now, if you look back at the other Gospels, in Mark 6, let's see. Where's it at? Matthew, there we go. In Matthew 14, while He was feeding the crowds and sending them away, it says, immediately He made them get into the boat. It wasn't dark yet, y'all. It wasn't evening yet. And in Mark 6:45, the same thing. But John says, now when evening came, His disciples went down to the sea. See? And verse 17 says, after getting into the boat, they started to go across the sea. It had already become dark. Now, I'm wondering, okay, we see in the other gospel that He made them get into the boat while He was sending the crowd away while it was still daylight. And then they went out there and, they must have come back. They must have delayed going once they got into the boat. That's the only way I can figure it. I'm thinking, what in the world? Did somebody forget something? Or they just, maybe one of them picked up a girlfriend. They were waving at the big family get-together there. I don't know. We don't know. But somehow there must have been a delay. And then they finally got out there and they got themselves into trouble. I'm wondering, my mind, maybe they should have went on right then when Jesus said, and they wouldn't have had that wind bother them. Just a thought. Now the Bible don't say all that, but it does make it clear that when He first told them to go, they didn't take off and go. But later we see that they finally did obey, and it was dark when they finally got into the boat. Just a thought. Everyone who followed Jesus ended up in a place of need. They experienced some trouble. And Jesus saw every one of them. He saw what they were going through, and then they got to experience something that nobody ever had before. They got to see Jesus coming because they got to a place of need. They were following Jesus, okay? We're going to mess up, but just keep following Jesus. Make sure you follow him, and then you're qualified for a miracle. Every time there's a place of need, there's a place for God to do a miracle. Let's stand together in prayer.